Timothy Bryan Cole was a 26-year-old Army veteran who was studying business at Texas Tech University in 1985. On the night of March 24, 1985, Timothy was at home studying, while his brother had also been hosting a card game at their family home. For Timothy, this was just another night of studying. He was completely unaware that the events that would transpire that night in Lubbock, Texas, would change his life forever. Timothy Bryan Cole was arrested and wrongfully convicted for the rape against 24-year-old Michelle Mallon. On March 24, 1985, 24-year-old Michelle Mallon was a victim of rape. Just before the attack, Michelle, a fellow Texas Tech student, was parking her car in a church parking lot across the street from her residence building in Lubbock. After parking her car, Michelle noticed an African-American man approaching her vehicle. The man continued to ask Michelle for jumper cables to help start his car. When Michelle informed the man that she did not have any cables with her, he then took the opportunity, reached in through her window, and unlocked the car door. Michelle started screaming and attempting to bite the man's thumb. However, when she realized the man had a knife, her reaction was halted. The man then proceeded to hold the knife up against Michelle's throat and forced her into a lying down position where he climbed into the driver's seat. The man drove to a field outside of town where he forced Michelle to perform oral sex, which was then followed by vaginally raping her. The perpetrator then drove Michelle in her car back to Lubbock, stole some of her possessions, and walked away on foot. Michelle Mallon called the Lubbock police and reported the attack. After reporting the attack to Lubbock police, Mallon, a white woman, described her rapist as a younger African-American man who was wearing a yellow shirt and sandals. Additionally, she also mentioned to the police that the perpetrator had been smoking throughout the attack. These limited details consisted of no unique characteristics and were all that Mallon was able to provide in order to help conduct the investigation. Due to the 4 similar attacks that had also happened within the same location, the police were starting to believe that Mallon's attacker may also be connected to these other incidents. This serial rapist was referred to as the Tech Rapist. Following this, the police began to conduct surveillance around the campus and posted sketches of the perpetrator in the Texas Tech campus newspaper. Students on campus were deeply scared and wanted the perpetrator to be found. While on a frantic search for the perpetrator, any student of color knew that for their safety they must stay inside after dark. This specific population of students were worried of the possibility that they might get tangled up in this investigation. As we already know, on the night of Mallon's attack, Timothy Cole was at home studying. However, according to the police, he fit the description of Mallon's attacker. 2 weeks after Mallon's attack, Cole visited a pizza restaurant just 2 blocks away from the scene of attack. Outside of the restaurant, a detective approached Cole and began to ask him various questions. After this conversation, the detective determined that Cole was in fact a suspect in the investigation. Shortly after this, a detective arrived at Cole's house and took a Polaroid of him. Once obtaining this Polaroid of Cole, the detectives provided Mallon with a photo lineup that included 6 photographs. Amongst these 6 photos, Cole's was the only Polaroid. The other 5 photos were mugshots. Additionally, these photos were also inconsistent due to the fact that Cole was the only photo that was looking directly into the camera. The other 5 photos only illustrated side profiles. After viewing the photo lineup, Mallon was immediately able to identify her attacker. While pointing to the Polaroid of Cole, she said, "That's him." The very next day, the police conducted an in-person lineup that included Cole and 4 prisoners. When Mallon was presented with this lineup, she again chose Cole as her attacker. However, when the victims of the past attacks observed the lineup, they did not identify Cole as their attacker. On April 11, 1985, based solely on Michelle Mallon's eyewitness identification, Timothy Cole was arrested and charged with aggravated sexual assault. On September 11, 1986, Cole's trial began. Cole was being tried for the rape of Michelle Mallon. He was never charged for the 4 other rape incidents. Throughout the trial proceedings, Mallon testified that she identifies Cole as her attacker. When forensic evidence was being presented, a forensic examiner from the Texas Department of Public Safety testified about the evidence collected from the rape kit at the hospital after the attack. The forensic examiner stated that evidence of sperm had been detected in the kit. Upon this discovery, the analysis told the jury that the swab contaminated a type A secretor, while conveniently adding that both Mallon and Cole are type A blood. The examiner also presented the court with the testimony that pubic hairs were also collected from the victim's rape kit. The examiner stated that the laboratory compared foreign pubic hairs to the ones collected from the victim. With this comparison, the examiner then testified that the hairs had similar characteristics to Cole's hair. This exact testimony provided to the court by this examiner was inherently prejudicial to the court and lacked value. In the year of 1986, there was not an adequate amount of empirical data on the characteristics in human hair. Considering the lack of knowledge on this particular area, the forensic examiner's testimony should have been disregarded. In regards to Cole's defense team, they did in fact present to the court that Cole had a strong alibi defense. Cole's brother and various friends had also testified in court that Cole was at the apartment during the time of the attack. Additionally, Cole had also presented the court with the fact that he has severe asthma and does not smoke. Since Mallon in the beginning of the investigation stated that the perpetrator was smoking during the attack, Cole's team believed that this would be a good defense. Cole and his team attempted to enter various pieces of evidence, such as the fact that similar attacks continued to happen even after Cole's arrest, and even the fact that the fingerprints from the victim's car did not match Cole's. The judge decided that all of this evidence would not be allowed before the jury. With just 6 hours of deliberation, an all-white jury found Cole as guilty. On September 18, 1986, Cole was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Despite multiple attempts, all of Cole's initial appeals were denied. In 1995, after the 10-year statute of limitation for rape ran out, a prisoner named Jerry Wayne Johnson confessed to the rape of Michelle Mallon. Johnson wrote letters from prison in which he was already serving a 99-year sentence for 2 sexual assaults. Although Johnson had confessed to the rape in his letters, they were never acknowledged at that point. On December 2, 1999, Timothy Brian Cole died in prison due to complications with an asthma attack. Cole died before ever knowing that another man had confessed guilt to the crime that he was wrongfully convicted of. The following year, Johnson's confessions finally came to light after reaching the Innocence Project of Texas and Cole's family members. The Innocence Project of Texas sought for posthumous DNA testing, and the Lubbock prosecutors agreed. After completion of the DNA test, it was concluded that the semen collected from the crime scene was not Cole's, which implicated Johnson as a true perpetrator. In 2008, Cole was cleared by DNA tests, in which the following year, on April 7, 2009, a Texas judge officially posthumously exonerated Cole. Following Cole's posthumous exoneration, Texas passed the Timothy Cole Act, in which it increased the compensation paid to exonerees to $80,000 per year served. Additionally, the state of Texas also created the Timothy Cole Advisory Panel in 2009, which is designed to study the prevention of wrongful convictions across the state. Michelle Mallon, the victim in the case, continues even today to speak and write about the Timothy Cole's case in order to raise awareness about false eyewitness identification and wrongful convictions. Once Jerry Wayne Johnson's confession letter was made public, Mallon joined Timothy's family in working to officially exonerate Timothy. The American justice system deeply failed Timothy Brian Cole and Michelle Mallon. The purpose of the institution is to protect and rightfully provide justice to all American citizens without negligence. The justice system is inherently corrupt, and as a result of so, it has led to multiple cases of wrongful convictions. In the case of Timothy Cole, there were several different factors that contributed to his wrongful conviction. The first factor is obvious: race. As Cole was a young African-American man who was living in the 1980s. The fact alone that his skin was black was all that the Lubbock police needed in order to place a target on his back. The second factor is false eyewitness testimony, which can also be entwined with the cross-race effect. Firstly, the photo lineup that Michelle was presented with consisted of multiple flaws. All of the photos should have been taken with the same camera. The photos should have all been displaying the full face profile. And lastly, none of the men should have been prisoners. When Michelle was presented with this flawed photo lineup, all of her instincts were leading to Timothy Cole as her attacker because he was the only one that was standing out. Additionally, the cross-race effect is also present throughout Mallon's false eyewitness identification. According to the definition of cross-race effect, it occurs when individuals are better at identifying people in photos that are of the same race than they are at identifying people in photos who are of a different race from themselves. With this, it is likely that Mallon was experiencing difficulty identifying her attacker and believed that Cole was the suspect that best fit her memory identification. The third factor is community pressure for conviction. At the time of Michelle Mallon's rape, there had already been 4 other attacks that transpired, all similar to Mallon's attack. As a result of this, the serial rapist roaming the streets, the campus community was terrified. The community wanted answers and they wanted the rapist to be found and convicted. Based on the community pressure that Lubbock police had been dealing with, they were determined to end all of the public worry and panic. Unfortunately, the moral panic resulted in Cole suffering the consequences of another man's horrible actions. The fourth factor that contributed to Timothy Cole's wrongful conviction is judicial malpractice and improper forensic evidence. Throughout Cole's trial proceedings, he and his attorneys had attempted to present the court with valid evidence that would ultimately prove Cole's innocence. However, the judge denied all of the evidence and did not allow it to be presented before the jury. Despite the fact that Cole's fingerprints were not a match to the ones found in the victim's car, the judge on Cole's case still denied the evidence. Additionally, the jury on Cole's case consisted of an all-white individuals in which there were no people of color. This brings Cole's and his case to an extreme disadvantage. In order to offer a fair and honest trial, the jury must represent the community and be able to understand the suspect from their perspective. With an all-white jury attempting to understand a black man, this was just not possible. The use of improper forensic evidence is also present throughout Timothy Cole's case. The forensic examiner who testified in court stated that the pubic hairs collected from the victim's rape kit shared similar characteristics to Cole's hair and is completely and utterly improper. The analysis should have never stated this in the court, and the judge should have also disregarded this testimony to the jury. Despite the extreme lack of evidence to even come to this type of conclusion, the examiner made this unethical testimony and the judge allowed it. The American justice system has been failing U.S. citizens for many years now, and will likely continue to do so for many more years. Unfortunately, as seen in the case of Timothy Bryan Cole, he was not the first wrongful conviction, and he definitely won't be the last. In order to prevent wrongful convictions and minority groups from falling through the cracks of the justice system, it is highly important that society continues to not only spread awareness, but to also educate citizens on the impacts of wrongful convictions and false eyewitness identifications.